to Can You Just Sit With Me? Where I discuss hope in grief, hope in the hard place, and hope during the challenging times of life. I am your host, Natasha Smith. Thanks so much for joining me today. Hey there, I am flying solo today and just excited to sit with you today. If you're like me, you can't believe that the end of the year is here. Like, where did it go? You know, there were some spans of the year that seemed to have moved at a snail's pace, kind of like January seems like to take forever. But then there were times of the year where they went by as fast as lightning. But nevertheless, we are here at the end of the year. And so I just wanted to take some time to recap our year here. You see, I had this grand opportunity this year to sit with so many friends to chat all things grief as well as hope, the most important piece. So today I'm sharing a compilation of the most powerful takeaways from 2022. So sit with me as we recap a year on Can You Just Sit With Me?
I've heard aren't you ready to move on? Like, don't dwell on your grief.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, we don't want to get stuck wallowing, but grief is forever because love is forever. If the last stage is acceptance, then how does it ever end? Because you get to that point of acceptance, but it doesn't just make grief disappear.
Exactly.
It's always part of you. It forever shapes who you are going forward.
Those who grieve value and long to be seen, heard, and understood. James Peterson, in his book, Why Don't We Listen Better?, says his first rule of crisis is to listen first and to talk second. Because if you acknowledge people's fears, pain, losses, hurts, confusion, anger first, then they may calm enough to hear your thoughtful reassurance.
The loss of a person, for instance, you are going to go through cycles. You know, it's not one cycle through and then you're fine. That's silly. We know that. But it's the same when you are letting go of parts of yourself or dreams that you had or relationships or anything. It's normal to cycle through and to continue to cycle through. It's normal to wake up one day and all of a sudden just be really angry. It's okay.
I wholeheartedly believe that God cares about your feelings. He cares about your grief. He cares about the things that have happened to you that you're struggling with. But also, God doesn't waste anything. So out of the ashes, you're going to find just a purpose rising up through your pain. And if God hasn't redeemed your pain yet, He's not done. He's not finished.
Grief can't be boxed into a stage, nor can it be labeled by what we are or aren't experiencing within a certain time frame, because we are so very different. I believe it was Kessler that actually says, grief is like our fingerprint. No one grieves the same. So can we just be allowed to grieve in healthy ways without labels?
And then my mind was racing. I was like, I'm a drug addict, I'm homeless, and now I'm pregnant. I said, I can't, I have nowhere else to turn. I'm at rock bottom. Like, that was rock bottom. And in that moment, I turned my face to heaven and I said, God, please help me. In that moment, when I found out I was pregnant, and He answered me and He said, come with me and you will never have to go back to this life again.
I felt like everything had the best possible outcome in the whole world, like so many miracles, and here I am perfectly fine and healthy again. What right do I have to feel any grief or like that was trauma? And so just to hear a mental health therapist say, Michaela, that was a very traumatic event. Like, it was very validating.
That first Mother's Day, and still even to this day, Mother's Day is a really difficult time for me as a mom, because I never had the opportunity to experience my mom while being a mom. So it's been quite quite a hard date to get through every time. You know, you have their birthday, you have their death day, as I like to call it. And those days are tough, but for some reason, Mother's Day is really, really tough for me. Like so much so that even as a mother, I struggle to celebrate it.
Like this life here matters, but it is not all that there is. So we don't list because we know someday God will set all things right. When we look at injustice, we know we serve a just and good God, and someday He will set that right. Someday He will wipe every tear from our eyes. Someday we will live in perfect unity. That sense of just something's wrong here, and we're going to feel it, and we won't be able to hush it. Before Christ returns and until He makes all things new, we're going to sense that.
In terms of, you know, I'm feeling this and I don't see God here right now. And yet being able to step back and believe truth about God. What was so hard in that experience, in addition to having death inside my own body, but I think it highlighted the vulnerability of each of my living children. Something as beautiful as childbearing and motherhood is even one of those areas where we experience deep suffering.
Yet the grief I experienced was so different. Both are unbearably hard, and both I still continue to walk out. And I can go down the list. My relationships were all different, and they all held different spots in my life, and they all held different parts of my heart in life. And there's no wonder why it feels as if parts of us are missing when we lose a loved one or even something that we love.
It's really hard to make sense of that, especially when you have such a deep relationship with someone and then one day you just can't make that call anymore, and that's deeply painful, and it's hard to figure out and make sense of that. And even as believers, it's hard to sit in that, because I know that we can grieve with hope and we know that we'll see them again someday, but in the in-between, before we get to see them again, we still have to learn to navigate what it looks like to live without them on this side of eternity.
That grief is kind of like a tangled ball of yarn. It's just rolling along, easy, unraveling, and it's not difficult. And then other days you come up on a knot or you come up on a tangle, and it means you have to stop and you have to spend some time with that yarn to untangle it and unravel it. And that's so much how grief is too. There's some days where I can just kind of soar through, and there are other days where I have to be more deliberate to take time.
Saying that to God, God, this isn't fair. Like, it's not fair that I lost my son. And I can remember just in God's absolute compassion, He said, I know, Melissa, I lost my son too. And knowing that God Himself had walked through losing a child, I was able to just start to process and go, okay, right, God, like you are not unused to grief and pain, and you can help me walk through this journey.
God is using His word in pain or out, right? No matter what season we're in, God's word is relevant. It applies. He's working it out. But I had never had to read my Bible through desperation. And then I realized the majority of the Bible was written for that. And it was like God just became so much bigger.
God has never left me. I was the one who was running from God. At 16, I put both middle fingers up and I was like, I can't believe you would allow something else to happen to my family. I can't believe you would allow something else to happen to me. Thinking that He's like sitting up there orchestrating misery and mayhem. He's not. He uses the misery and mayhem that we have to go through in this earth. Now I can sit here and tell people this story of resilience and grace through the despair of how much shame and trauma I lived through.
I was angry. I was evaluating how things had been handled and still wondering what we could do differently, even when, there probably was not anything at that point we could do differently. I would not let go. And then, just in the couple days leading up to when he died, just incredible emotion and sadness. All of the things I wish I had said or done differently. And I think those kinds of things probably happen to a lot of us when we lose someone.
That brings me to the end of this episode. Thanks again for joining me, and thanks for listening to Can You Just Sit With Me? If you enjoyed the show, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, and be sure to come back for my next episode of Can You Just Sit With Me? Until then, this is Natasha Smith, helping you to find hope in grief, hope in the hard place, and hope in the challenging times of life. Be sure to connect with me across social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at I'm Natasha Smith.